Hello and welcome to our Facebook Live. We are going to be talking today to Heidi Rabinowitz. She is a librarian that specializes in Jewish children's books. So we are going to be talking in general about Jewish children's literature, and then she's also going to be talking specifically about books for Purim. So if you're looking for some good books to read for Purim, she's going to be sharing some of her favorites. But, also just talking in general about Jewish children's books. It's one of those categories that tends to get overlooked when we talk about diverse children's books. A lot of times people forget about Jewish children's books, and of course they're an important part of children's literature. So we're going to be talking to her about some of her experience. She has been a member and chair of the Sidney Taylor Book Award, which is a really important book for Jewish children's literature. And so she's been really involved with that. And I just found out when I was getting ready for this, that she is a founding member of the PJ Library Selection Committee, which PJ Library, if you're not familiar with it, is a really wonderful organization that focuses, again, on children's books with Jewish characters and Jewish themes, and they really do a lot to help get those books in the hands of children. So she was a founding member of that selection committee. So we're going to be talking to her. She just has a wealth of knowledge and experience. She has a Facebook group. I know where there she is, where she helps promote and support other creators of Jewish children's books. And she has a wonderful podcast, The Book of Life. So she has a lot of experience for us. Hello there. Sorry, let me just adjust the screen. Hi.
Hi.
Well, why don't we just start off? Maybe I was giving a little introduction, but maybe you could just introduce yourself and also maybe talk to us about why you got so excited about children's books and decided to go into being a librarian and be so involved in helping support authors and illustrators.
Okay, so hi everybody, I'm Heidi Rabinowitz, and I am the librarian at Congregation B'nai Israel in Boca Raton, Florida. And I'm basically a children's librarian for the kids, mostly in the preschool, but also in the religious school. And before that, I was a public librarian in children's services. So I've always been a huge fan of children's books from being an actual child on up. And when I grew up and I wanted to stay involved with children's books, I thought maybe I'd try to get into publishing, but it was hard to figure out how you break into publishing. And librarianship was a clear path. You go to an ALA accredited library school, you get a degree, and somebody will hire you. So that's what I did. And then when I came to work for the synagogue, it just became interesting to me to be able to work with a group of books that is small enough that you can kind of know the whole genre. It's been growing, but it's still pretty manageable. You can know pretty much, you can get familiar with pretty much everything in the genre. And so I found that it's a great way to advocate against anti-Semitism, for tolerance and understanding, is through children's books.
And I have to say, I can understand what you're talking about, because as someone who reviews children's books, I sometimes wish that I did have a more narrow focus. I mean, I do focus on diverse children's books, but even with that, there are so many, so I can see the appeal of working with a smaller subset. But you've been doing this for so many years. How have you seen the field change?
Well, the field's been growing, for sure. There are more Jewish books published every year. At this point, approximately 200 books with Jewish content are published for kids through YA every year. And because of that, for instance, the Sidney Taylor Book Award, which I have been the chair of in the past, has grown. So when it started in 1968, it was just one award. That was it, like middle grade. Then they added picture books, or am I remembering wrong? Was it picture books to middle grade? Anyway, they added a category, and then later we added the young adult category because the field kept growing and you couldn't represent the whole thing with just a single award. So that just is an example of how it's been growing.
And people may be surprised, if they're not that familiar with the field, that there is a lot of diversity. I know that's something that you have done a lot to bring to the fore, and you've written several articles for Multicultural Kid blogs where you've done book lists that really showcase that diversity. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes. So the Jewish community itself is quite diverse. People probably don't realize that, but approximately 20% of Jews, I think of North American Jews, are African American, Latinx, Hispanic, Asian, Sephardic, Mizrahi, or mixed race. Not to mention the intersectional Jews who have disabilities or who are have various gender or sexual identities. But even the 80% of Jews who are white Ashkenazim of European origin are also diverse because we're a marginalized community. So all Jewish books are diverse books, period.
Right. And as I mentioned when I was, before you came on, I think that's something that gets overlooked a lot when we're thinking about diverse books. Like you said, I mean, there's diversity within the Jewish community, but Jewish books are diverse just in and of themselves.
Right, exactly. And the We Need Diverse Books movement has affected Jewish publishing along with the rest of publishing. So you can see that actually in some of the Purim books that I'm going to talk about today, that the intersectionality has increased over the years. So even though I selected specifically a bunch of diverse Purim books that I want to talk about, they've gotten less white over the years, and more kinds of diversity are being showcased.
Wonderful. Well, do you want to go ahead and jump into that?
Sure.
And maybe set it up. I maybe just a very, very brief introduction to Purim if there's somebody watching who's not that familiar with it.
Yes, absolutely. It's not one of the best known holidays, especially outside of the Jewish community. So Purim is one of the many holidays that goes along with the theme of they tried to kill us, we survived, let's eat. So that is a catchphrase that describes many Jewish holidays. And that's true for this one too. This one is a real soap opera. So when the Jews were kicked out of the ancient land of Israel and went to Babylonia and Persia, this is where the origin story takes place for Purim. And it's this whole long, crazy, convoluted story about Queen Esther and how she saved the Jewish people from the wicked advisor to the king named Haman. And he was a power-hungry person who was very insulted when Jewish people wouldn't bow down to him. They said, we only bow to God, and he didn't like that. So he's like, well, I'm getting rid of you guys. And the queen went to the king. The reason she was the queen, it was a whole Cinderella contest that she became the queen through this beauty pageant kind of thing. She didn't tell anyone she was Jewish just for safety. And then when push came to shove, she had to tell the king. She identified herself, and the king stood up for her, banished Haman, or actually it depends on the version you're reading. In the original, he hangs Haman on the gallows that he was going to hang the head of the Jewish people. In some of the kids' versions, they don't include the hanging. It's not kid friendly, but so it's this kind of nutty holiday where the way we celebrate it is kind of like a cross between Carnival and Halloween. So people get dressed up in costumes traditionally representing the characters from the story, but now, any costume you want to wear because it's just fun. And traditionally, this is, for the adults celebrating the holiday, the idea is that you're supposed to actually get drunk. You're supposed to drink until you can't tell the name of Blessed Mordecai, the hero of the story, from Wicked Haman. The kids' part is getting to make lots of noise. So we have these noisemakers called groggers that you shake, and they make a lot of loud, ear-splitting sounds. And when the story is being told in synagogue, they retell the story. Whenever the Haman's name comes, everybody shouts and stamps and shakes their groggers and drowns out his name because he's the bad guy. Also, if you've ever had Hamantaschen cookies, which are those triangular tarts, they are specific to this holiday, and the tradition is that Haman had a three-cornered hat, and so these are shaped like Haman's hat. So it's kind of a weird holiday, but it's a lot of fun. It's probably the most fun of all of the Jewish holidays, the most playful, I would say.
Oh, wonderful. That's a great overview of that.
It's hard to encapsulate it, honestly.
Well, that was a very good overview. So did you want to share with us some of the books you have?
Yeah, well, before I share these specific books, I wanted to say that this is an unusual year because 6 Purim books were published this year, and it's very unusual to have so many about a holiday that's not Hanukkah or Passover, because honestly, that's where most of the publishing goes, is towards those better known holidays. But it's very exciting that we have so many right now. So just to name them real quick, and all of these are being reviewed on the Sydney Taylor Schmooze during this week, right before Purim starts. So the Sydney Taylor Schmooze is a mock award blog for the Sydney Taylor Book Award. The Sydney Taylor Book Award is the award from the Association of Jewish Libraries, and it's basically like the Jewish Caldecott or Newbery. So on the Sydney Taylor Schmooze, we have book reviews of all of the books that are potentially eligible for that award. And so the books are Yummy Hamantaschen, which is a board book, very simple. Purim Time, which is Purim Time because it's kitty cats. The Purim Panic, Lily Blue Riding Hood, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Duct Tape Purim, which is an arts and crafts book and explaining how you can use duct tape to make costumes. And The Royal Recipe, which is a short chapter book. And that's nice because it's that sort of early end of chapter books, and we don't see that many Jewish books filling that niche, so that's particularly nice, and that's part of a series of holiday books. And the Holiday Highlights Committee of the Association of Jewish Libraries creates recommended reading lists in the spring and in the fall as the books are coming out. And so this spring's list has 4 Purim books on it. It has Lily Blue Riding Hood, Duct Tape Purim, The Royal Recipe, and another one I'm going to talk about called The Book of Elsie. And those all were named as holiday highlights. So those are the ones that AJL is recommending as the very best holiday books. There were Passover books on the list too, but I won't tell you about those right now. And I'm happy to share links to all of these things that I'm talking about on the event page after we're done with the video.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So just to talk about the diverse Purim books that I wanted to mention, we're going to start with the oldest one. And for the oldest ones, I actually have the books on hand. For the more recent ones, I do not. But this is the oldest one. And this is called Cakes and Miracles. And it is by Barbara Diamond Golden. And it actually is from 1991, but this is the re-illustrated version from 2010. And it's a little bit of a weird story because it's actually about cookies, but it calls them cakes. And it's a story of a blind little boy who lives in the shtetl in Eastern Europe, in the old countries, as we say. And because he's blind, he can't participate as his mom is baking hamantaschen and baking things to sell because they're very poor, of course, as people always are in these old stories. And he sort of has this miraculous dream where he can see in his mind, he can see cookies. And so then he actually shapes the cookies by feel. And they're not hamantaschen. So that's the other kind of weird thing about the story, is that it's a Purim story and the cookies are not hamantaschen. So it's odd in a few ways, but it's got the representation of disability because the boy is blind. The next oldest one I wanted to talk about is the Purim Superhero, and I have that here also. And this is by Elizabeth Kushner, and it is from 2013. And what's significant about this one is the child has 2 dads. Now, the story is not really about that so much, but it is in a related vein about doing your own thing, being yourself, not letting other people tell you how to be. So the kids in class are all deciding what costumes they're going to have, and the boys are all like, well, we all want to wear superhero costumes. What superhero are you going to be? Because you're one of the boys, you have to also be a superhero. And he doesn't want to. He wants to be an alien. And so, he has to decide to do what's right for him. And he happens to have 2 dads. And what was interesting was when this book came out, it was a big deal because it was one of the first Jewish picture books with gay representation. And it came out through, it was used through PJ Library, which is a Jewish kind of like a book of the month club for children. Free books get sent to families. And with this book, instead of just sending it, it was like, I think it was like upon request or something. Like they didn't just send it to everybody because it was too controversial. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but when it was new, that was the case.
When did
that
that one out?
That one came out in 2013.
Okay.
So 10 years ago. Let's see. So the next few that I want to talk about are a lot more recent. So I have a couple from 2021 and I don't have them to show you. I'm sorry. I can put links in the event page afterwards. One of them is called Esther Didn't Dream of Being Queen by Alison Ofanansky. So Queen Esther is the heroine of the Purim story. And this is from Apples and Honey Press. So what was interesting about this one is that the characters look Middle Eastern. And this is actually more historically accurate. But, you know, the tendency before this has been to just make characters look white. And that's been a broad tendency, obviously, not just in Jewish books, but in general, that even characters who aren't necessarily white tend to be depicted that way. Bible characters tend to be depicted that way, even though probably none of them were as pale as that. But so that's the thing that I would say is significant about that particular book. And then also in 2021, also from Apples and Honey Press, we had Queen Vashti's Comfy Pants by Leah Rachel Berkowitz. Now, Queen Vashti is the displaced queen. At the beginning of the story, the king is married to Queen Vashti, but because she doesn't do what the king says, she is deposed, and then Queen Esther comes along through the beauty contest. So it's kind of a misogynistic story, but, you know, it's an ancient story. Anyway, so in this book, it's very feminist. Queen Vashti and all her girlfriends are hanging out in their comfy pants, and they don't want to change into their party clothes and go to the king's party. It's part of that whole refusal to do what the king wants. They want to do what they want. But what's interesting is that not only is the queen Middle Eastern looking, but her friends are a very diverse group. So you've got a variety of skin tones. One of them is in a wheelchair, I guess like an ancient wheelchair. There's an older woman, so there's age diversity. So it's a very diverse group who is representing this story. Then in 2022, which this book that actually got onto the 2023 holiday highlights list because oddly, just because of the weirdness of publishing, it was published in the fall, even though it's about a spring holiday. So it was included in the next list where Purim was relevant. So this book is called The Book of Elsie by Joanne Levy. It's from Orca, published in Canada. And this is actually a middle grade book. So that's really unusual to have a middle grade book that is about Purim. And it's about a girl who has two dads. Now, again, this is not the point of the story, but that's the setup, is that she has two dads. And the story is actually about Elsie dealing with modern anti-Semitism. And it's called The Book of Elsie in honor of the Book of Esther. The Book of Esther being, you know, Queen Esther, the story that we read at the holiday. So Elsie kind of parallels Esther's journey in terms of being brave and helping her people, helping her community. And then the other one I wanted to talk about that I mentioned earlier is called Lily Blue Riding Hood by Sandy Lanton. It's from Intergalactic Afikomen is the publisher. And Lily is brown. And when you look at the pictures, she's mildly brown. But it becomes more obvious when you see the picture with her mom sending her off, you know, as just like Little Red Riding Hood getting sent off to go, you know, with your Hamantaschen to grandma's house. Her mom is white. So you can see the difference. You can tell that, yeah, Lily actually is brown. So it's a family with mixed heritage. So that's very nice. And it's cute because it's, you know, it's a Little Red Riding Hood takeoff. And I like it because it takes place in Florida, and I live in Florida, and it's rare to see children's books set in Florida. So that's also a benefit, I think. So those are the most diverse Purim books that I could think of, you know, diverse in various ways.
What a great list, and thank you for offering to put the links in the event page. But I mean, it's great for us who are not as knowledgeable about the field to really get to kind of get an overview and get a sense of what the new books are and what's out there, especially you that you have so much knowledge about this. Is there something you think like, you know, we've talked about just how the field just keeps on growing. Is there anything that you think that you would like to see more of, or on the other side of it, that you think people who maybe are not as familiar with Jewish children's books, any misconceptions that you think people have, or something that you want maybe people to understand more?
Sure. I think the main thing I would say is that Jewish books are not just for Jewish readers. Now, obviously, there are some that are aimed specifically at Jewish readers. We're not telling everybody to go read the Torah. We're not telling people to read prayer books. And we're not telling people to read books that are aimed specifically at Jewish readers. For instance, a lot of books from Orthodox presses are aimed specifically at Orthodox readers. They don't really explain the vocabulary or the customs or so on because they're just filling the needs that their community has, and that's fine. But the kind of books I'm recommending are books that are for everybody. And we definitely want non-Jewish people to read these books to help them understand us, to demystify Jewish people and Judaism, to make friends with Jews on the page if you don't know any in real life. So that's a big message that I want to get out there. And also that we're not proselytizing or anything. We're not trying to make non-Jewish readers be Jewish by reading Jewish books. We just want to be seen. We just want to be understood. And they're fun stories. They're enjoyable no matter what your background is.
Definitely. And just to echo what you said, I know you do a lot around the fact that about anti-Semitism and how, that is something that really kind of keeps coming back in our country culture, and how much books, like you said, if you don't know a Jewish person in real life, meet them through books. I love the way you phrase that, and to demystify, that all goes towards building empathy and building connections. It really goes so far towards fighting anti-Semitism.
Exactly. And actually, I worked with the Association of Jewish Libraries on a series of book lists that is exactly for that purpose. It's called Love Your Neighbor. And there's 8 lists currently, but we're still open to developing more lists. And those are all books that we selected with non-Jewish readers in mind. So they're books that we think will be easy for people to relate to if they don't already have the background, and easy to help them understand more about Jewish culture. And I'll put
I was just going to say, if you wouldn't mind linking to those, that sounds really wonderful.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of resources that I'm very excited to share with people. I don't know if there are any librarians listening, but another resource that I developed with the Association of Jewish Libraries is actually a guide for libraries to evaluating Jewish representation in children's books. And actually, you can use it for adult books too, but children's books is my area of expertise. So that is a guide that walks you through what are the issues to be aware of, what are the pitfalls, what should your goals be. So it's very much aimed at like public libraries or school libraries, or libraries that don't necessarily serve Jewish readers but want to include Judaism in their diverse lineup.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I hadn't thought about that before we started talking, but I know there was, I don't know if it's like a year or so ago, sometime recently, there was a big controversy over, let's see if I can remember the name, is it The Boy in the Striped Pajamas?
The Boy in the Striped Pajamas.
Coming out with or has come out with a sequel, and
right.
And that was very, not just erroneous, but kind of really damaging, and a lot of stereotypes and misconceptions. So is that something you run across a lot when you're, when new books come out, especially ones that are coming out from, say, non-Jewish writers about these kind of events, especially, I would imagine, especially around the Holocaust, but maybe it comes out in other instances as well?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. Fortunately, we don't see that many books that do a poor job. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas definitely did a poor job. I've spoken about that extensively, but the majority are actually pretty good, including many books by non-Jewish writers who have done their homework. I would say that Holocaust books are the most likely, I guess. I don't have specific numbers to back it up or anything, but my impression would be that a non-Jewish writer who is going to write about a Jewish topic is more likely to write about the Holocaust than any other topic, because it's particularly compelling material. And so that's where you're more likely to find those slip-ups. But it's not that bad. Mostly we're seeing pretty decent representation.
Oh, well, that's good to know. But I'm also glad that there is like this kind of resource that would be helpful for librarians who, like you say, are not that familiar with the field and maybe don't know what the issues are. So that's a really great resource.
Yes, I'll link to that too.
Sorry, I feel like I
No, don't be sorry. I'm excited to get to share all this.
Good. Well, thank you so much. I'm just looking at the time, so I'm going to let you go and enjoy your evening. But I really appreciate you taking time at the end of your day to come and talk to us about this. This is really wonderful. And thank you for sharing all these resources and these wonderful books. It was really great to talk with you.
I'm very happy to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
All right. Bye, everybody.